Yasya kale vishesho govindamari purusham tamaham vajami. The origin of the material world is Mahavishnu, who lies in the causal ocean. While he sleeps in that ocean, millions of universes are generated as he exhales, and they are all annihilated when he inhales. This Mahavishnu is a plenary portion of Vishnu, Govinda, Yasya Kala Visheshaha. The word Kala refers to a plenary portion of a plenary portion. From Krishna or Govinda comes Balaram. From Balaram comes Sankarshan. From Sankarshan, Narayan. From Narayan, the second Sankarshan. From the second Sankarshan, Mahavishnu, the Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. Kshirodakshaya Vishnu controls every universe. This gives an idea of the meaning of Ananta, unlimited. What is to be said of the unlimited potency and existence of the Lord? This describes the coverings of the universe. Saptavir Dasha Gunotarayar Andakosha, the coverings of the universe. The first covering is earth, the second is water, the third is fire, the fourth is air, the fifth is sky, the sixth is the total material energy, and the seventh is the false ego. Beginning with the covering of earth, each covering is 10 times greater than the previous one. Thus, we can only imagine how great each universe is, and there are millions of universes. As confirmed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 10:42, Atava Bahunaitena Kim Gyatena Tavarjuna Vistabayam Itam Kritsnam Ekam Shenas Tito Jagat. But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support the entire universe. The entire material world manifests only 1/4 of the Supreme Lord's energy. Therefore, he is called Ananta. Translation again by Srila Prabhupada. Every universe is covered by 7 layers: earth, water, fire, air, sky, the total energy, and false ego, each 10 times greater than the previous one. There are innumerable universes besides this one, and although they are unlimitedly large, they move about like atoms in you. Therefore, you are called unlimited, Ananta. Ukam karoti vachalam pambamam gayateji kirin yakri patarham mande shigurudina tarane. Prabhupada is emphasizing in the purport that the Lord is infinite, but he's also very small or infinitesimal. There are some examples of infinite and infinitesimal. One is that the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, or the all-pervasive aspect of the Lord, is in every atom and very small in the Anu portions. Sometimes the dimensions of the soul are enumerated. And one of the ways that it's enumerated is that it's a very small portion of the tip of a hair. The tip sounds like a very imprecise thing, and these days we're accustomed to quantifying and measuring everything exactly. Like we talk about things in terms of centimeters and kilos and things like that. But in Vedic literature, sometimes we encounter words like the tip of a hair. And in the English language, sometimes there's words that aren't very precisely measurable, like grains and granules, tips, bits, pieces, parts. But they're very commonly used. So in one sense, everything is not correct. What we learn and study about the structure of the universe and the structure of material things and atoms is difficult. It's very precise, and sometimes it involves. There's a lot of advancement in terms of transportation, in terms of communication, medicine, travel. And so being able to measure has its benefits, but in another sense it's not beneficial. Like in most books we will read that a thing is the size of a hand rather than being, say, 10 by 15 centimeters, the size of a human hand, or the size of a box, or a bread box, or something like that. So there's a lot of scope for using words that aren't very precise, and we don't know what exactly a mustard seed is in dimensions, but it's a very small thing. And the same with a grain of sand. It's a very small thing, but they're not necessarily measured, and they're not all necessarily the same. But Prabhupada is because he came to the Western world where things are always, not always, but usually measurable, at least in science. They're measurable and quantifiable. He talked about, there's references in the Vedic literatures about the dimension of the soul. The soul is very fine, and it's supposed to be very, very insignificantly, almost invisible. Even by the most powerful microscopes, one cannot see what the soul is. And yet, the dimensions of the soul are mentioned in the different parts of Vedic literature as Keshagra, Esham. In the Bhagavad Gita, I think in the 10th chapter, the last verse says that, and Prabhupada quotes it here, the 10th chapter, 42nd verse, Atava Ekam Shenas Tato Jagat is the last verse. And that means that there's, Ekam Shena means one part of the whole universe. So Krishna is saying that even though he's very, very large, he controls all the universes, and there's more than one universe according to this purport. There's several universes, many universes, millions of universes actually. And we tend to think that we're the only universe, but according to this Bhagavad Gita verse and other parts of Vedic literature, this part of the material world is only a small 1/4 of the whole creation. It's mentioned as Ekam Shenas Tato Jagat, one part. But that one part is mentioned in the Puranas and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita verse. There's a verse that says what that part is, and it's only 1/4 part. In other words, we're in the 1/4 part, and the 3/4 of creation are the spiritual world, and 1/4 is the material world. So in a sense, we're kind of in a minority part of the world. And what we think is very gigantic and very huge is actually a very small and very minute portion. And the translation that Prabhupada gives here is, "But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade this entire universe. The entire material world manifests only 1/4 of the Supreme Lord's energy. Therefore, he is called Ananta." So here he translates it that it is 1/4, even though it's not in the Bhagavad Gita. In one of the Bhagavad Gitas, I think in all the Bhagavad Gitas, it just says one part. It doesn't say 1/4. But here, it is 1/4, and it's mentioned also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is a Padma Purana quote, that it is only 1/4. So what we think is the entire universe, the whole thing, is only 1/4 of the whole creation. So in a sense, we're a very small part of the whole creation. And not only an insignificant part of it, but a part that is relatively small and not the normal condition. We have a feeling that this is the normal condition that we live in. But it's not really normal. It's a difficult thing. And we tend to think that everything is perfect and enjoyable here in the material world, and everything is based on enjoyment. But actually there's another kind of enjoyment which is spiritual, and in lectures Prabhupada has talked about Krishna consciousness being a process of recreation. There's just singing and dancing and feasting. And actually, what is more enjoyable than singing and dancing and feasting? Is there anything very difficult about singing and dancing and feasting? That's what people like to do. Sing and dance and feast. And when films first started coming out, I don't know what it was like, but there was a lot of, we used to call them musicals. There's a lot of singing and dancing. Still there's a lot of singing and dancing in films that are made in certain parts of the world. There's a lot of, it's required that there's always singing and dancing. So in one sense, the process of Krishna consciousness, although it's very philosophically deep and very, very precise in terms of philosophy and very exacting, and sometimes in Navadvip people were considered to be great celebrities if they were successful in debates. But this is a process basically of enjoyment, of celebration, of singing and dancing and feasting. And this is what everyone likes to do. But in this but it can be done in a spiritual way, and that's what temples are for. That's what is the process in temples of singing and dancing. That's what people do. They eat, and from what I'm told, there's more Hare Krishna restaurants in this country than any other country per capita. So singing and dancing it's a recreational process. This is going on always in the three-quarters part of creation of the spiritual world: singing, dancing, and feasting. But it's being done in a spiritual way. It's being done for Krishna. Whereas what we live in now is very contaminated. We've never seen pictures of Krishna meditating, Krishna operating machinery, or Krishna in any way reading newspapers. Never see pictures of Krishna doing that. Krishna is always enjoying. He's playing the flute, he's dancing, he's singing, he's eating, but never operating machinery. Never. And in this world in which we live, things are based on technology. The word science used to mean knowledge, general knowledge, but now it's come to mean technology or things like that. When I was at university, there was a growing department that was the technology department. It was known as a liberal arts university, but that was also literature and history, but it was being overtaken by the so-called science wing. The science wing were basically people that were learning about technology and things like that, and very measuring things and medical things and measurements. The first time I think I ever saw Prabhupada become angry was when someone that he was lecturing at the University of California at Berkeley, and someone in the audience was unseen because it was in a very darkened room, was saying, what is the purpose of all this spiritual knowledge that you're propagating when I've come to study technology, and that's the most important thing. That's what's going to alleviate poverty in my country. This person, he was probably from India, and he said, I'm learning technology, and that's the most important thing. And this is the first time I ever saw Prabhupada become very angry, and he recognized that this person was from his country, and he was very angry because this person had come to the West to study technology, and he called him a beggar, and that he said, I am a giver. I'm giving spiritual knowledge, and you've come to learn technical knowledge. You come to this university not to study history or language or anything else but mathematics and physics and chemistry so that you can really alleviate poverty, supposedly. And I've come to give spiritual knowledge. So something very unusual was started in the United States. It was the beginning of a movement of spiritual knowledge and a sense to bring God back into society. We live in a fairly godless world. I was one time giving a talk in Boston. Boston is the city in the United States which is the home of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is considered to be one of the leading universities for technology. And but because people are very inimical to the very concept of God, that there's a supreme controller over the universe, I didn't use the word God, I said the G word, because I knew that these people were very inimical toward the concept that there could be a controller. Actually, it is a very commonplace thing that people are very disturbed when there's the idea of someone who's in control of everything. Actually, we learn in school that we have to be in control. We have to question authority, and we have to be the ultimate authorities and the ultimate people who decide what is right and what is wrong. Actually, the Bhagavad Gita, this is the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God, which is the main treatise of Krishna consciousness, establishes what is right and what is wrong. It is the basic idea of what is right and what is wrong. And in the dust jacket of the Bhagavad Gita, there's three people are quoted. One is Emerson, one is Thoreau, and one is Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi was saying that when doubts assail me, when I become bewildered, I pick up the Bhagavad Gita and I read a verse and it pacifies me. I become very, very, very pacific and very satisfied that my wants are insignificant and that agitation, bewilderment is insignificant. And Emerson wrote that he's quoted there in the dust jacket, that I owed a great day to the Bhagavad Gita. But Thoreau's quote was that Bhagavad Gita is very magnificent. And from that quote, one can guess that he was reading Bhagavad Gita not just once, but every day. And he said, his quote starts that, in the morning I bathe my intellect in the phenomenal and cosmogonal philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. And in the morning kind of indicates, and it can be interpreted that he was reading it more than once, and maybe every morning. And if he lived from to be about 50 years old and he started reading it when he was 20, he might have read Bhagavad Gita thousands of times. And so I just want to ask how many people here are reading Bhagavad Gita, even once or twice or thrice or 4 times or 5 times or 6 times. But people find this philosophy is very significant. It's the ultimate treatise about right and wrong and what one should do with one's life. If a person becomes subjected to living in this material world, this 1/4 of the creation, there's a very difficult passage into the spiritual world. Even though Krishna consciousness is very, very easy, it's a system of recreation, singing, dancing, and feasting. It's also required that one follows certain regulated principles, that one has to be a little bit austere. So there's the notion that a yogi is someone who lives in a cave or in the Himalayas and is renounced and doesn't associate with people and is very aloof from society. But a Krishna conscious yogi is a person who lives in cities, in very, very heavily populated areas. And those persons' mountains or caves are like the streets and cars and byways and universities where there are thousands of people, not just a few people. So it's a kind of renunciation. The Rupa Goswami writes about that renunciation that renounces the world and says the world is bad and I'm not going to associate with anything in the world is only partial. And true renunciation is Vairagya, he says, is not something it's true renunciation is something that we do in life. We participate in, and in many ways Krishna conscious people are acting, and they seem to be doing many things. They're involved with technology, but they're doing it for Krishna, and that kind of renunciation is considered to be the perfect renunciation. Instead of just giving up and going away, that kind of yoga is considered to be imperfect. There's a river in India which is underground, and it's considered to be an important river, but it runs underground. It's sort of like an underground aquifer. So it's called Falgu, and that means it's hidden or unknown. And so renunciation can be also unknown by people who engage in activity that doesn't seem to be necessarily giving up or going away or renouncing or living in a cave or in the Himalayas. There's another kind of renunciation that involves activity. There was a conference, an ecological conference in Brazil about 20 years ago, and people that were invited were involved in ecology, and they were quite amazed to know that people that were in the Krishna consciousness movement involved themselves in technology. They drove cars, they used computers, they printed their books in very high technological ways. And the idea was that these people were all invited to learn that technology could be a very useful thing if it's engaged in the right way. So that's the principle of renunciation in Krishna consciousness. So I think I'll end here. If there's any comments or questions anyone wants to make, I'll do my best. Yes?
You're talking about renunciation in Krishna consciousness. There was a time when the yogis were using a lot of electrical instruments, doing kirtans and focusing more on the beat, their training, etc. So it seems as though we can use everything, but there's a fine line between Krishna consciousness and a lack of Krishna consciousness, although it may seem like that.
Well, my understanding of this phenomenon is that there's a risk in everything we do. And at one time, devotees started playing a lot of electric guitars and using those kinds of instruments.